should say that I'm neither a historian nor a biologist. My work's in philosophy, and more specifically moral philosophy, so my observations are going to come from that perspective, but hopefully they'll have a useful bearing on what we're discussing. So the consideration of the issues raised by the two cases, I want to talk about through the lens of largely hypothetical future developments in transgenic human enhancement, because it raises a kind of a novel point. So when I say transgenic human enhancement, I mean the incorporation of certain animal traits into human beings that are not found within the human species in order to add novel functionality. And I'll return to these near the end. But we can start with the observation that many of the same genes are found in humans and other animal species, but these genes are expressed differently to produce different outcomes. One example of that might be the PAX6 gene, which is essential for the development of eyes and other light-sensitive tissues. And there's evidence that this gene has been present for around 540 million years, or at least 540 million years, and consequently it's found across the animal kingdom from flies right down, from humans right down to flies. So, although at one high taxonomic level, it might be simple enough to make interspecies distinctions. Given that certain genes are shared, it's not obvious at a lower level what the correct threshold should be for identifying genetic material as definitively human. And consequently, decisions, including moral decisions, about the inherent patentability or not of human genetic material are based on an ambiguity that would become increasingly unstable with the appearance of interventions which integrate animal DNA into human beings in ways that might enhance health or human functioning. So both, with respect to the two cases, both Myriad and Monsanto stand accused of attempting to enforce unfairly and fairly monopolistic protection over objects deemed to be in some way natural. So we could ask whether the IP and business strategies of either company have created the same level, would have created the same level of controversy if the protection sought was, for example, over an analogous but functional sequence of porcine DNA in Myriad's case, or a whole genome sequence of a new and productive soil bacteria in the Monsanto case. Moreover, transgenic enhancement of human beings is for the time being largely hypothetical, and consequently, we can ask, whether interventions of this kind would raise new and distinct difficulties which don't pertain to Myriad and Monsanto cases, or whether we'd just be restating existing objections and challenges. So we might ask, for example, to what extent should such interventions be considered as natural or unnatural? So if we take these uncertainties into account, alongside the initial difficulty concerning taxonomic classification, the lens of transgenic human enhancement adds weight to the claim that what is uniquely human, as distinct from being something else, is ambiguous and malleable, and consequently the extent to which patenting human life or not is or is not possible in principle is unclear. I'd like to say two things about the Myriad case specifically. So one objection to the patent might be that the resulting test is, or at least was, prohibitively expensive, and that a greater net benefit to women affected by breast cancer could be obtained if the test were cheaper, or if indeed no patent were awarded such that Myriad could monopolise the market. So, of course, the objection to this is that, one objection to this might be that without sufficient incentives or protection, Myriad would not have developed the test in the first place, which would, so the argument would go, be even worse for women with breast cancer. So both of these arguments are reasonable, but I think there's one kind of assumption hidden there which hasn't been discussed and which provides a different angle. So assumed in all of this is that it's acceptable to engage in certain sorts of research in the name of therapy. The dreadful effects of cancer justify the development of the test and its introduction to the market, and the ensuing debate as to whether it's acceptable or not to patent the isolation of part of a human genome. So, but notwithstanding these objections, it's not the research as such, I think, which is objectionable. Underpinning the Myriad case is an assumption about the moral worth of human beings, i.e. that saving the lives of humans justifies proceeding with research that might result in controversy. And that's fine. But in view of what I've said, if the ontological status of humans looks different depending on what level of biological taxonomy we favour, we have to remember that these kind of deep moral assumptions are dependent on a species concept which is, on one view, quite ambiguous. So I'll restate the problem. The ontological status of humans is, on one view, contestable, and yet we retain a deep moral commitment to the protection of the species. But what is it that we're protecting? I think the reason why the hypothetical transgenic human enhancement example, hypothesis, is useful is that, for example, if it were possible to isolate and extract a sequence of snake DNA that makes it possible for them to see in infrared and incorporate it successfully into humans, so that humans could be engineered to see in the dark, or if we could do the same with canine DNA to engineer humans with canine hearing ability, or if we could engineer humans to have the navigation capability of birds, the resulting humans would, I think, still be human, even though they've been conferred with an ability which is entirely species atypical. And in the same way, if I have a replacement heart valve from a pig, I don't become part pig. If I can see in infrared, I'm not part snake. And it's only because of the incorporation of the part of the snake genome that I'd be able to do so. So humans can be quite significantly species atypical and still be considered human. We don't know what the precise threshold for being human is, and for this reason, the implicit moral appeal being made to the value of human life in the myriad case is one which needs further unpacking, since it becomes possible to manipulate DNA in increasingly novel and perhaps extra therapeutic ways. We'll need to be sure about the meaning of the concept than we are at present. In particular, if therapy is natural in some way, it restores normality, but enhancement is unnatural because it doesn't, it goes further than that. The controversy is likely to grow, and in this respect, the two cases considering today might just be the tip of the iceberg. So to close this off, I'd just like to say, return to the case of the discussion of oncomice. So whilst maybe it's unpleasant to think of giving mice cancer in order to develop therapies for humans, it's morally justified by the perceived difference in moral status between humans and mice. In particular, there's difference, I think, in terms of sentience, since sentience confers autonomy. The apparent moral importance of autonomy can be seen in the controversy over using primates in research. The reason why mice and other animals are used in research is because they're sufficiently genetically similar to humans for the results to be useful in human disease research. So, to play devil's advocate here, you could say, well, if we wanted to be maximally effective with this, and if it's just about sentience, why not just breed completely non-sentient human beings and use them in research instead? This breaks a strong intuitive moral taboo, and this shows that it's not just about sentience. It's about something less obviously expressible of what we think is morally important about being human. So this difficulty in cashing out exactly what we think is valuable about being human persists in all the cases where we're talking about whether or not it's acceptable to carry out a novel procedure in the name of improving life. It seems to me if we consider the patenting of human genetic material, we're caught on the horns of a dilemma which relates to something like human dignity or autonomy, because these terms are notoriously difficult to explain, and the history of moral philosophy has not produced any conclusive success so far with respect to these concepts. And so I think, and some people question the usefulness of these concepts for that reason. So on one hand, we can justify certain kinds of genetic research for treating disease in the name of something like human dignity. On the other hand, it's also in the name of human dignity that the objection has been levelled that it's unacceptable in principle to commodify parts of our genetic constitution. And so I think this tension underlies discussions such as the myriad one, and it seems to me that until we have a better explanation of what these concepts mean, or what's valuable about being human specifically, then controversies in aspects of genetic research such as patenting will persist and probably grow.